Hello and welcome to the catch-up for June 2024. I'm Paul from Give Toke.
And I'm Christina from AusCannaReviews.
And we come together each month to explore what's happening in cannabis in Australia and around the world. Get in touch with us by emailing giveandtoke@gmail.com
or AusCannaReviews@gmail.com.
and follow the links in the show notes. So we're going to get started with current affairs straight off the bat. Our first article today comes from the reputable source of news.com.au on the 3rd of June, and that is Senate report rejects proposed laws to legalise recreational cannabis use in Australia. So a Senate committee has rejected a bill introduced by Green Senator David Shoebridge, which calls to allow for cannabis possession for personal use in Australia, as well as the establishment of a national agency to regulate the growing of plants. The push to legalise the recreational use of cannabis on a national scale has been knocked back after experts expressed concerns it would lead to more use of the drug amongst young people. Christina, thoughts on this one?
I would say that the stats don't back that up. When you start looking at things from Canada, they would tell you that young people, like teenagers and things like that, those stats have definitely gone down for sure. And so I think that that's kind of like a bullshit response. I feel like there were other things in the bill that they could have pushed back on and wording, but to hang their hat, if you will, on, oh, it's going to lead to more drug use amongst young people, I think that's a cop-out.
This is the sorry state of kind of cannabis and drug understanding in Australia, isn't it? Like, I've had David Shoebridge on the show to explain this bill, and I'll put it out there. Fantastic man, enthusiastic, such a great advocate for progressive causes. This is not a great model, in my opinion, given what I've seen around the world. But what I do respect is he kind of found the endpoint and worked backwards within the legislation that's available. We established this canna agency. We, have this seed bank thing. We have these cannabis cafes. That's what the current legislation allows. Now, I'm not a fan of the model, and I would love the criticism within this board to have been of the model rather than this prohibitionist idea that, somebody please think of the children. Because as you said, while it's a small impact, Canada is a great example. Teen use has not gone up. Child use has not gone up. It's gone down by a couple of percent, and that's the information, and those are the stats we actually have. So I'm not shocked to see this shot down. It's just shot down for the wrong reasons.
Agreed.
Our next story comes from Al Jazeera on the 10th of June, and that is South Africa legalises cannabis use. Will the rest of Africa follow? So on the eve of the May 27 general elections, the president signed the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, making South Africa the first African nation to legalise cannabis. The bill removes cannabis from the country's list of outlawed narcotics, meaning adults are now free to grow and consume the plant, except in the presence of children. And the bill also stipulates that those who broke the law by committing such deeds should have their records automatically wiped clean. So this was a real shock. This came out of nowhere for me. I like to think that I have my eye on the ball, and this was kind of snuck through before the election. It's like, boom, legal.
I don't know if I would say that it caught me off guard, because I guess I do follow a couple of people who are active in the cannabis scene in South Africa. That being said, I wonder on some level if it's a little bit of a political play because of the timing. But I think the thing that stood out for me most was the fact that it actually stipulated that those that broke the law because of this plant, that as they push this legislation through, well, you know what, we should automatically wipe those records clean. Because again, you start looking in other places, again, Canada, there are still some people who didn't have their records wiped clean. So good for South Africa.
Yeah, there's unfortunately still no information about when this might happen in terms of the expungement of records and how, because I think there's about 3,000 people that, are eagerly awaiting what that outcome is going to be. But it's a really exciting progressive step for South Africa, for an African nation, and it'll be really interesting to see what the ripple effects around the world are, especially as we've just spoken about us having our legalization knocked back. So I think you're right. It's a political play, but hey, I'm all for it if it gets us closer to the end goal.
Me too.
All right, our next story comes from Cannabis on the 12th of June, and that is Ananda Clinic's founder, Jamie Rickord, to step away from the industry. So Dr. Jamie Rickord is stepping away from the industry, claiming the emergence of a pseudo-recreational market among the reasons for his decision. Rickord, who founded Ananda Clinics, is switching his focus to psychotherapy and research. So, this is one of the early adopters kind of saying, I don't like the way the industry's going, so I'm out, dog.
it's interesting, right? Because there's definitely a rise of a pseudo recreational market, for sure. For sure. I mean, you don't have to look very far to see, the people that are posting on Reddit and what they're posting about and how they're posting things, right? I understand what he's saying, for sure, but how do you, when you're inside, you have a better chance of fixing things than when you're standing on the outside. And so when you throw your arms up and say you just want to walk away from something, it's almost like you're giving up when you clearly can identify where there are areas of opportunity. And because you're on the inside, how about you lead by example and you keep showing up for the patients like you and me, Paul, that still need you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think it's really unfair to paint the community with these broad brushstrokes because yes, those people are there, and I think this comes down to, again, a very Australian thing where it's like you start to focus on the negatives of something and that overwhelms you to think that that's what everyone's doing. But I kind of find his position to be the antithesis of any of the doctors I've spoken to in this space. I've had Dr. Shu Ung on the show, my doctor. I've had Dr. Maddie Moore from Mode Healthcare in WA on. And I've asked that question. I'm like, how does it feel when people say to you, this is what I want. Hey, this is what's going to work for me. Hey, I tried my friends, ... And they, have the humility to say, we're learning in this together. But there's an excerpt from this article that I think really speaks to where Dr. Jamie is at and his opinions on that kind of thing. Because he says, people say I want to try the blueberry haze or the purple haze or whatever. And I'm like, bollocks, this is an Amsterdam, mate. And I find that to be really reductive of the approach people are taking. There are so many people wanting quality healthcare. Stop punishing those of us that do just because a few people do see this as a pseudo-recreational market. We should be looking more at how do we get to a more balanced adult use market, a more balanced medical market so they can kind of supplement each other. Because yeah, there are people wasting doctors' time, sure, but there are also plenty of people not getting the healthcare they need when they go to these doctors and, they're short, sharp telehealth appointments and it's not great healthcare. So I'm with you on this one, stick around and change it from the inside rather than making judgments from the outside and kind of, getting angry at these people that are using it quote unquote recreationally. We always say it. Most people that are using it recreationally, if not all, are using it for some therapeutic benefit, whether they admit it or not.
Exactly. And I think one of my things is that it's all about education and it's all about helping us all understand how the plant works with our system and what we're looking for. And some people pick up on like for me, because I write those reviews, I was able to pick up on things like, holy shit, terpinolene and omycerine together are my jam. And so now I absolutely do ask for cultivars that are high in those two terpenes. For sure. So does that make me a rec user? I don't think so. I think that that's just me getting on top of my shit and figuring out what works for me. So, like I said, I feel like there are areas of opportunity and there needs to be more education. And you and I have had these conversations about, I'm not sure where that education is exactly supposed to come from. But again, you're on the inside. How about you be the change you want to see?
So our next story, and this is one really, not because there's a hell of a lot of progress, but because we've been keeping an eye on it. And that is coming from AsianNow.com on the 13th of June. The majority oppose recriminalising cannabis in Thailand. So Thai Minister of Public Health, Somsak Thepsuthon, reported that the majority of public feedback opposes making cannabis illegal. Many people prefer cannabis to be regulated and taxed like alcohol or cigarettes, and he encouraged continued public participation, assuring that all comments would be considered before finalizing any legal draft. So look, as I said, we're reporting on this because it's an ongoing story. Just like when they legalized it, doesn't seem to be any real clarity about how they're going to regulate it. So an interesting one to continue to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is just a kind of, hey, this is what's going on because we have been following this story. And, obviously, most people prefer for it to be regulated and taxed and not for them to do the 180.
Yeah. If people are interested in Thailand and they're not following Kitty Chopika on Instagram, kind of keeping an eye on her advocacy and all the tireless work she's doing, please make sure you jump on Instagram and check her out and see how much work she's doing to try and protect this emerging industry. Our next story and final story comes from the Daily Mail, ever reputable, much like news.com.au. And this is from the 14th of June, and that is German police encourage England fans to smoke cannabis instead of drinking. So German police have issued a warning to English fans ahead of the Euros and encouraged them to smoke cannabis instead of drinking alcohol. Police have demanded the Valtons Arena serve low alcohol beer ahead of their opening game with Serbia, as they are concerned that both the English and Serbian fans could cause issues in and around the stadium if they're intoxicated. So this is a really interesting one. You know, Germany's just legalized, and now we've got the cops being like, hey, guys, you know, we brew a lot of beer here. We have a massive beer industry, but maybe, just maybe, smoke some weed and chill out instead of getting real angry here.
I really do love this story. When I think back to being younger and in situations where I was going to sporting events with lots of males who were consuming alcohol, yeah, those tailgate parties. I mean, this is football, not even soccer. This is American like college football. They get really out of control. And having been somebody who was part of Greek life and went to many a frat party, again, I'll tell you, boys, and I don't want to just say boys, but alcohol fuels sporting events and the fire and the passion that's there. And from personal experience, I would rather live next door to a house full of cannabis smokers than a house full of drinking sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, 100%. Like this speaks to, there's anecdotal experience and actual evidence. We have evidence in Australia that issues of family violence increase around the times of big sporting matches. This is so many people's identities. The only time I've ever been in like highly aggressive conflict situations, the common denominator is alcohol, and more often than not, there is sport involved. Your team's lost, your team's won, whatever it might be. So I'm stoked that the German pragmatism has come out here and gone, hey guys, maybe smoke some weed and chill out instead of, being dickheads on the piss.
I love it though. I really do. Good on you, Germany.
So yeah, quite as always, a lot going on in cannabis, in Australia and particularly around the world over the last month. It's always exciting to kind of check in and see what's going on. We continue to watch this space with Thailand, and look, it does look like something's going to change at the start of next year. So again, I encourage anyone who's interested in Thai cannabis tourism to get over there before the end of this year. So this month, we are introducing a new and occasional segment called The Roundup, which aims to help the listener stay abreast of the differences in cannabis and drug laws around Australia. We know medicinal cannabis is legal in every state, but the approach to unregulated cannabis remains vastly different across Australia. So in today's Roundup, we're going to briefly explore how each state is approaching illicit cannabis. So the information in this segment comes from investingnews.com and can be found in the show notes below. So this article first popped up in 2022 and subsequently is kind of updated every few months to make sure that it is in line with the regulations of cannabis. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go through each state and let people know kind of what to expect, because I don't think people realize, there's not huge differences, but there are some subtleties, and there are some states where it's better to be a cannabis consumer than others. So we'll kick things off with New South Wales, where possession of 15 grams or under can be a caution for first-time offenders, and repeat offenders are often referred to a drug counselling program. So New South Wales are in kind of an interesting position right now. Jeremy Buckingham's doing a lot in state. The Labor Party have said there's going to be a drug summit, but New South Wales is really kind of treading water with any kind of progressive cannabis reform. We hope that they can make a difference, but right now we're not seeing a hell of a lot of change.
Yeah, they're pretty stagnant with their change for sure.
So moving on to Victoria, where possession of 50 grams or under is a cautionable offence, but usually results in drug counselling. So one of the things about this drug counselling idea is still that if you're a cannabis user, you've got a problem. So it's really great that people can avoid jail time or massive fines by going, pay $400 to go to this drug counselling program. But again, we're still claiming that drug users have a problem. And the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And we know that a lot of people do have problems that use drugs heavily. But Victoria has arrested more people for cannabis in the last year than any year beforehand. So as much as we like to think we're progressive down here in our little Dan Andrews bubble, we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. And I'm actually quite disappointed with where Victoria is at, particularly after 420.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I wasn't there and I was just about to bring up the rally. You're right. It is interesting because again, we've already talked about this with them showing up with the drug dogs and everything else, overkill. Yeah, Victoria.
80 cops for 250 people. It ain't right.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on to your home state of Queensland. Now, it's pretty complicated in Queensland because on one hand, Queensland have made huge changes to decriminalisation laws for possession of small amounts of drugs, and polls show that half of Queenslanders support legalisation. However, the legislative side has 4 different acts in which the Queensland police can punish you for cannabis possession. So we're still a really long way from kind of getting these things down. And anecdotally speaking, friend of the show, Hannah Turner, was arrested and charged for the possession of less than 1 gram of cannabis, which was 5 meters away from her medical cannabis container while she was in a park. So, it's really hard to put a number on, what's okay to possess in Queensland when, I've personally had a friend go down for less than 1 gram of medical cannabis.
It is weird. It is weird. But then you stop and you think with Queensland, and they had, I can't think of the festival off the top of my head, but they had the music festival here that was the first to do drug testing. So, I mean, we are making little steps in the right direction. It's just, I think again, we're not cohesive in our approach.
And I have this little theory, much like with 420 in Melbourne, that the closer we get to these progressive changes, the harsher the policing comes in the lead up to that. That we're seeing some kind of death rattle, the final death rattle of prohibitionist thinking. So I'm hoping that while Queensland is still quite volatile, they've got a lot to show for themselves in their progression as well, and that eventually that progressiveness wins out.
Let's hope so.
So moving on to South Australia, it is completely illegal to possess, grow and give away any form of cannabis in South Australia. South Australians are anxiously awaiting a cannabis legalisation bill that was tabled by the Greens in 2022 to be acknowledged, let alone read or passed or anything. So things are quite stagnant there and have been for a number of years. And we're even seeing they've recently moved to an immediate loss of license for a positive test at roadside drug testing, even if you're a medicinal patient. So across Australia, as we're trying to move towards better drug testing, less discrimination for medical patients, they've gone, nah, stuff the lot of you, you're going to lose your license at the test. So South Australia is not the place to be for cannabis as far as I'm concerned.
It's weird that they took such a strong stance about taking your license away like that when nobody else did that.
Yeah, I spoke to the police minister from South Australia about this, and he has absolutely no regrets or qualms about this level of discrimination. They've got their little bit of data about how many road traffic accidents feature cannabis, doesn't specify whether they're actually contributing factors, nor are they looking at the impacts of any other drug, on the system of people that are driving. So, yeah, you've just got a real kind of tough on crime approach there. South Australia was a Labor stronghold for nearly 30 years. They lost the last election to the Liberal Party. Then they got it back. I think there's probably some political hesitancy there to do anything too progressive because they just realize that they can lose it. So it's a shame, because lives are hanging in the balance here and livelihoods, but these are decisions being made. But let's move on to, another state, because I think South Australia is probably at the bottom. So let's move on to Tasmania, where possession of cannabis is completely illegal. And interestingly, any utensil or appliance used for inhalation or preparation is illegal and can attract a fine of nearly $8,000. So we're talking grinders, vaporizers, bongs, rolling papers. This stuff can get you a fine of $8,000 in Tasmania. And that's a very old school way of thinking.
It makes me laugh, right? Because they're also the only place that, like, if you are a medicinal patient, you can have it in your system.
Yeah.
Why be like, we acknowledge this as a medicinal treatment, as a doctor prescribed drug, but Lord help me, if you got anything to consume it, I'm gonna find the fuck out of you. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, and I think I keep coming back to this point often when people bring up Tasmania, is their progressive driving laws were an accident. They forgot to discriminate against patients rather than made an allowance to not. So I think that's where the line of thinking comes in, is they actually kind of fucked up by not discriminating against this. But Tassie, to their credit, does give up to 3 warnings for under 50 grams of possession. And as you mentioned, they do allow us to drive us medical patients. So there's some credit to them there. They're a little bit old school on the rules with paraphernalia. All right, we're getting to the tail end. We've still got Northern Territory, Western Australia, and of course the ACT. So Northern Territory, surprisingly, largely decriminalised. However, possession in public can still attract imprisonment, and possession of less than 50 grams in your home can result in a fine or imprisonment. So look, I think it's probably not too hard to put the dots together in Northern Territory. They're like, hey, we're okay with cannabis, but if we want to get someone for something, this is an easy way to do it. That seems to be the way those laws are structured there.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one.
So Western Australia, they decriminalised cannabis in 2004 and then repealed it in 2011 as a part of a tough on crime approach. And this speaks to me about, first of all, 2004 is a hell of a long time ago and a very progressive thing. But also, even when you get something you want, another government might come in and pull it back, or the very same government might come in and pull it back. So Western Australia are pretty tight. Possession of 10 grams or less requires intervention or a fine. However, they do have the great work of Legalise Cannabis MP Brian Walker over there, pushing for a referendum on legalised cannabis in WA on the state's next election ballot. So pretty interesting things to watch over there.
Yeah, I mean, Western Australia, it's kind of like Thailand. You got it, and then you lost it.
All right, finally, the ACT, which I think is probably Australia's most reputable cannabis location, because they passed a bill in 2019 to legalise the possession of small amounts of personal use. You can carry up to 50 grams of dry cannabis and can grow up to 4 plants per household. But you cannot grow indoors, and it's a pretty cold place up there, and you cannot buy seeds. So it's a little bit kind of silly. However, it's huge progress. But these laws are in direct conflict with the federal laws, which has still made it difficult for some people in the ACT. Again, anecdotally, I do know of someone who was raided by the Australian Federal Police. They had their 4 plants growing in the house. Your 4 plants have got to be grown by 2 different adults. So 2 plants per person, up to 4. And that person's housemate admitted to not being the other person. So therefore, all 4 plants belong to one, and they were, processed and charged accordingly. So it's still not a utopia up there, even though they've made better strides than anywhere else.
I feel like the ACT is kind of like what Vancouver was, like in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like, again, as long as you're not acting like an asshole, they kind of look the other way. They're kind of okay with it until you kind of give them reason not to be okay with it. Is it the best model? Probably not, but it is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I definitely would have preferred to have lived the last 5 years with those rules rather than the ones we do have in Victoria here. So again, yeah, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good, and you've got to take some good things, particularly credit to the Labor Party in the ACT, because they were the ones who took this upon them. Michael Pedersen, he is not a cannabis consumer, but still saw the importance of this. So there is, quite a bit going on around Australia. That is the roundup for this month.
As we shift to hot tokes, do you have something that you want to get off your chest, Paul?
No hot tokes from me this month. I got up on my soapbox last month about, people getting mad at Big Pharma. It's just pure good vibes from me this month, Christina. So no hot tokes from me. How about you, though?
Oh, see, now I feel bad that I have a hot toke. It's not really a hot toke. I've really noticed here in the last, I guess, few weeks, really, that I've started to have more and more conversations with people around stigmas and, again, education and the terminology and things that we use. And I think this is just kind of, I guess, for me, if you will, and something that I personally am going to start working on is the terms black market versus green market. And so I say black market all the time when I'm talking about my old use, or when I was younger in Canada, oh, black market, this and that. But the truth is that wasn't really black market. That's more of a green market. Those plants were grown for love. There was no going back to fund illegal activity going on from the people that I was getting my cannabis from. Back that up, when I was getting Mexican brick dirt in Texas, 100% that money was funding illegal activity. That is black market. However, what I was getting in Vancouver from legacy growers and things like that, that's green market. And I've noticed that I'm guilty. I've been just mushing it all together and just calling it all black market. And that's there's a difference there. And I'm, again, I'm about breaking stigmas. I'm about education. And this is my, I guess, commitment to myself, to the listener, and everybody else moving forward. There's a distinction between black market and green market. And you have my word that I will start using those two terms more accordingly.
No, I think there's some real respect that goes with, legacy market, gray market. I think black market can be used, not as a throwaway term, but as a market we don't want to support. So, no, I'll make that pledge with you there, Christina. I'm going to try and do better and avoid some of those angry DMs. So, as regular listeners know, Christina and I both do a lot of work individually in this space. Christina, what should followers of AusCannaReviews expect from you this month?
Well, I just dropped a podcast with Alex Mitchell. She is from Invisible Iconic. She does a lot of advocacy work for endometriosis and whatnot. She was a delight to talk to. She gets very vulnerable and shares some pretty quirky little things about herself. It's cute. I enjoyed it. She was a blast to catch up to. I also have my Brittany's Frozen Lemons review going to drop, and Gorilla Glue #4.
I'm really intrigued about those reviews because Gorilla Glue #4 is something that I've loved in other markets, and Brittany's Frozen Lemons, anything from Chemovar really kind of grabs my attention. And look, Alex Mitchell is a great asset to this industry and to this world and to this space. She's fighting to educate people, so it's a really great podcast, and it's great that you've had her on. And girl power.
Yeah, like I said, she was a blast to talk to. She was so cute. I love her.
Right.
How about you, Paul? What's going on with Give Toke this month?
Look, I just had a really good month. I mentioned in last month's show that I've launched the Give Toke cannabis accessories along with my wife, and we're working really hard on that to, build that brand and get those shipped out. We've had some really happy customers, so I'm really pleased about that. And as I mentioned last month, if you would like to buy, if you're interested, givetoke.com.au and use the code CATCHUP, CATCHUP, for $4.20 off. So, and that code works, with some other sales and things like that. So if you spot an end of financial year sale or a Black Friday sale, that code will still work in addition to those other sales. So that's just a little thank you to the listeners of this show. So look, it's just been a great month. Prior to the Cannabis Awards that were here in Melbourne a few weeks ago, Biotica Green Farmers hosted a pre-drinks, and it was great to rub shoulders with, people that from the internet and people that listen to the show and people that listen to this show. And that was just really energizing for me. This can be a really difficult space to operate in. It can be a really thankless space to operate in sometimes. And, you and I are hustling to be an important part of this world and, or, a contributing part of this world. And so it was great to meet so many other people who are, putting their livelihoods on the line, taking risks, whether it's financial, whether it's reputation-wise, to really boost this industry. And on a night like the Cannabis Awards, that was great. So I've recently had the crew from Treehouse Distribution on the pod. I also spent some time on that evening with them, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. Those guys talk a lot of shit about Australian cannabis, and they have teamed up with green farmers to have this partnership that will hopefully improve the cultivation and quality standards here in Australian cannabis. So yeah, look, just feeling very grateful for this industry this month, feeling very energized and feeling very enthusiastic about, what's to come.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. I'm looking forward to that Treehouse collaboration for sure. It should be good things.
Hell yeah.
Well, that's it for this month. You can find me at AusCannaReviews on Substack, Instagram, or Twitter.
You can find me at givetoke.com.au, and I also love to stay in touch on Instagram at GiveAndToke.
Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and be sure to tell a friend and share the show if you're liking what you're hearing. I'm Christina.
And I'm Paul.
Thanks for listening.